out a film where an actor is being shown as a smoker on screen. Any actor, Vijay, Shahrukh or anybody else across the world cannot be expected to cut down the $5 trillion smoking business in the world. How funny is it to call out for an actor where the government is earning taxes on alcohol, on cigarettes and rest everything else? I have seen Vijay's trailer. This particular song, I do not understand Tamil language, but I don't find a problem with him smoking on screen.
Shoaib, clearly it is not Vijay's job to actually take it upon himself to take care of the $1 trillion economy that, alcohol or tobacco is really bringing to the country. That is not the argument that can be made at this point in time, because here we are talking about his influence on especially the youth, because even a 5-year-old follows Vijay.
So for that matter, all these gentlemen who've been calling out against a ban on Vijay's film should have to revisit all these films, if you can allow me to name films like Urda Punjab, Charas, Shaitan, Smoke, Dum Maro Dum, High, Go Go Gone, Netflix series called Narcos, Breaking Bad, which are so easily available for a 5-year to a 50 to 60, 70-year-old, available at
But I think the point that they are also trying to make is the clout that Vijay commands as far as the industry is concerned. All right, Shoaib, let me actually bring in Mr. Dhananjay.
The scripts are derived from real-life events.
I would let you, you're very patiently listening to this entire conversation. How do you see the industry suffering with this constant moral policing? I'm going back to this term because every time there is something that sort of irks the morality or the consciousness of the civil society, there is a demand of banning the film or the product or the ad. How do you see the super censors really playing up in future for the film industry and also for the advertisement industry?
See, this particular controversy, to my mind, is politically motivated. The reason I'll tell you is that 2021, I'm talking about just 2 years back, Vijay's film with Lokesh Kanagaraj, film called Master came in. Yeah. In that film, Vijay was an alcoholist. Basically, he's completely addicted to alcohol. He drinks throughout the film. Nobody made any controversy about Vijay drinking in that film. It just released 2 years back during lockdown. Okay, and remember, so many times in so many films, so many actors have been shown smoking on the screen, and songs they had smoking and all. The first poster which came out with the Vijay, with the smoke and all, people objected to it, and
so you are saying later, this is a selective outrage. Why do you think that is? All right. All right, I'm really sorry. We have to wrap this on this broadcast. That's all the time that I had. Considering this is up for grabs, up for debate at the moment, we'd have to wait and watch what really happens to Leo, the film starring Vijay. With that, it's a wrap from my side. Thank you so much for watching.
Welcome everyone. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. All through Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first state visit to the US, politics and interest groups kept raking up the minority question. Both Prime Minister Modi and President Biden were even asked this question in their joint statement press briefing. Even as that was on, former US President Barack Obama's comments on this issue were already sparking a political debate. In an exclusive interview with CNN, former US President seemed to warn India that if minority rights are not safeguarded, then at some point India would start pulling apart. Interestingly, former Commissioner of United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, a body that has a history of marking India as a country of particular concern, slammed Obama and asked him to spend his energies complimenting India instead of criticizing it. In India, the government has taken a stern view, defending India's democracy and record. Meanwhile, the opposition has used these comments to further their attack on Modi government. They've even asked the centre to take the criticism positively and act accordingly. There surely needs to be a dispassionate debate on this issue. Data tells us a different story. Pew Research survey in India showed that 98% of Indian Muslims feel free to practice their religion. In India, the NCRB data shows that communal rioting has gone down considerably since the Modi government came to power. Moreover, the minority communities in India make up for 30% of beneficiaries in various schemes by the government. So are the allegations of violation of rights of minorities a claim without any proof? We'll take that question to our guests in just a bit. Several central ministers have hit out at Barack Obama's comments. Let me quickly take you through them. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh said, "We don't discriminate on caste or religion." He even added, "You won't find all 72 sects in Muslim countries, but you have all 72 sects of Islam in India." Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has hit out at Obama even more sternly, saying that 6 Muslim majority countries were bombed under his rule. She added over 26,000 bombs were used to target these countries, and that this is a deliberate attempt to vitiate the atmosphere in India. Meanwhile, Union Minister Hardeep Singh Puri also hit out at domestic attempts to question India's democracy, saying that Indian democracy is strong and that minorities are safe here and everywhere. Now, here is why the attack on minority rights in India doesn't stack up. The question in itself is disingenuous because there are no minorities in India on any parameter that have less rights than the rights of others, not even a single parameter. In fact, if you went to the nitty-gritties, Indian laws give special privileges to minorities in India even more than the majority. Temples are under government control, a practice of the British era, but churches and mosques are not. The right to education law gives special status to minority institutions that even Hindu institutions don't have, and I could go on and on. There is not a single instance of any discrimination in any government scheme over religion in the 2 terms of the Modi government. But even if this wasn't about rights but overall atmosphere, as I mentioned, ground surveys themselves show that self-reported discrimination in India is less than even of developed countries like the USA. Pew Research survey shows that Christians and Muslims both consider themselves freer in India than minorities do in USA, for example. But what is also interesting is the absolute difference in tone, tenor, and even words used by former President Obama and current President Joe Biden. While Obama said in his interview that it's appropriate for US President to uphold those principles, he was talking about minority rights, and to challenge trends that are troubling, when Biden was asked the same question, he said for India and USA that we are straightforward with each other and we respect each other. Obama clubbed India with China and said that protection of Muslim minority in a majority Hindu India is worth mentioning to an Indian PM, while Biden actively distinguished between India and China by saying that US-China relationship is not at the same space as India-US relationship because there is respect, because we are democracies. Remember, he recently called Xi Jinping a dictator as well. Now, a comment of Obama's that really raised eyebrows was his assertion that if you do not protect rights of ethnic minorities, then India could start pulling apart. Many feel this was inappropriate for a foreign leader to say and was harking back to the partition of India already done on religious lines. Biden instead said, "We believe in the degree of every citizen for India and US." Obama concluded saying that it would be contrary to interests not just of Muslim India but also of Hindu India if Muslim rights are not protected. Biden said instead that valuing all sections is in America's DNA and in India's DNA. So he put India and USA on the same pedestal, not India and China. The big debate that's coming up, are these sweeping claims about minority rights being diminished in India, particularly with regards to this current government, made without ample proof? That's coming up in just a bit.
The former president should spend his energy complimenting India more than criticizing India. India is the most diverse country in human history.
The Prime Minister and I had a good discussion about democratic values, and that's the nature of our relationship. We're straightforward with each other, and we respect each other.
यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स के विषय में हम अच्छा फ्रेंडशिप चाहते हैं, मगर उधर से भी भारत के रिलीजियस टॉलरेंस के ऊपर एक यूएससीआरएफ है, उनके कमेंट्स आ जाता है, राष्ट्रपति जी ने कुछ बातें बोल रहे हैं।
Let's go across to the guests who are joining us. R. Rajagopalan is senior journalist, advocate Arshpreet Kadial from the Congress, Sushant Sareen is senior fellow, ORF, and Ashok Sajjanahar is former diplomat. I want to go across to our political representative first. Arshpreet, do you believe that as Indians we need to be told by America whether our record is good or bad? And did you feel that the particular tone in which Mr. Obama made those comments, talking about even the breaking up of India or I don't know what he meant, possibly a partition or a breaking up, was that right to say?
Thank you. First and foremost, kindly allow me an uninterrupted minute. We also have Global Hunger Index. We have the Freedom of Press Index. So yes, if statements are being made with proof, with substance, they are to be taken seriously, especially when a two-time former president is making that statement of who happened to be the basically senior of the current president of US, Mr. Biden. So what we have to see here is, number one, that the Bharatiya Janata Party can try and silence the voice of dissent, of questions here in India, but they cannot do that everywhere. And if the Bharatiya Janata Party says that he bombed 6 countries, Muslim countries, this, that, then why did you not condemn it in the first place? Number one. Number two, wasn't he a so-called good friend of Mr. Modi, whom now you're saying happened to have bombed so many countries? And number three,
actually, even Obama, Mr. Obama called him almost like a good friend, Mr. Modi, in his interview. Even in this interview, he said, "I know him."
So if the Bharatiya Janata Party is saying that he happened to have bombed so many countries, one, why did you not say it then? Why did you not condemn it then? Shows your double standards. Number two, if he was so wrong and he has been so bad, why were you such good friends with him? Number three,
because we are friends with America. We are not friends with a particular president.
One last point, please. So I want to ask the BJP just one thing. If you do not have any discrimination and bias towards ethnic minorities, how many Muslims do you have in Mr. Modi's cabinet? Negligible representation. Number two, the Bharatiya Janata Party is clearly, not interested in answering the questions, because in India, they haven't done a single press conference in 9 long years. Mr. Modi has done none. But in US, he did a press conference. So, credits and congratulations to the Bharatiya Janata Party on this mega achievement. Number three, what happened with regards to UAPA, NSA, sedition, and, all the other cases that have been registered against people.
But these are all laws of the UPA era.
Pick up the stats. Sorry?
These are all laws of the UPA era.
I'm talking of UAPA,
yes.
UAPA, not UPA era.
No, of course, so UAPA was brought by whom?
Sedition. I'm not saying brought by whom. I'm talking about the misusage of it. I'm talking about the abuse of this law. And if you pick up the stats, you'll see maximum cases have been registered against the in the Bharatiya Janata Party's regime. Number two, maximum cases have not been led to conviction. It shows that
Arshpreet, you have to be brief in your opening comments so that I can come back to you. 1 second. Let me go across to Sushant Sareen on this as well. The issue is not whether there is discrimination against any minority in India. I don't think anybody can say that there is no discrimination at all, that it is nil or zero. The issues are two. The way India is being held to its quote-unquote minority rights issue, are other countries held to the same standard? Yes or no? The issue is also, is US the one to lecture India? And there was a remarkable difference in the tone that Mr. Obama and Mr. Biden used. Because the current president seems to be taking the line that, whatever are the issues we will discuss, and we are both together on this. In fact, several people even made the comment that USA is not a perfect democracy. There are incredible accusations of human rights violations there against minorities. So my question is twofold. One, is India being held to a different standard and particularly being maligned on this as contrary to facts? And is the US anyone to lecture us, as the government seemed to suggest? Certainly not Mr. Obama should be lecturing us.
Shivani, it's not just about Obama should not lecture us. I don't think anybody around the world has a right to lecture us. If they have any concerns, they can talk about it. If they go public and they think that, they have some kind of an exceptionalism, that they can go public and hector people, then other people have equal right to push back, like some of the Indian ministers have done since yesterday. That is one. The second thing is that, for the Americans, look, if we start pointing out all the problems in America and we say that every police shooting which happens of black people is because Biden is ordering it, or because the Democratic Party is ordering her. How stupid would that sound? Now, nobody is saying that America is perfect and nobody is saying India is perfect. Do we have our problems? Enormous ones. But when when he talks about, what is happening in India right now and stuff like that, the question to be asked is, okay, fine, the Congress party gave token representation to Muslims, but please ask the Congress party to explain why during the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and even the 90s, virtually every year there was a major riot, anti-Muslim, anti-Sikh riot in this country. Anti-Sikh only in 84, but an anti-Muslim riot. Why? I can give you riot after riot after riot after riot. People like MJ Akbar, including their members of parliament, people like Salman Khurshid and others have written books on those riots. How do they explain that? They were in charge. Was somebody saying that Indira Gandhi is doing these things? There are social tensions in this country. We recognize those. Those social tensions need to be addressed. But can anybody point out to any systematic, constitutional, legal discrimination against India? I believe Arshpreet is a lawyer, and maybe he should tell us what specific instance of discrimination has been carried out against minorities in this country.
Yeah, and particularly.
Number two.
Yeah, please.
Sorry?
Let's talk of CAA and NRC. Let's talk of how many people were left out of the group despite having all the documents. We all have seen that. And we have seen how many people have been prosecuted under all the laws that I was talking about: sedition, NSA, UAP, the abuse of power that has been happening. Because the conviction rate has been a negligible low. And the Bharatiya Janata Party, despite that, has been pressing for these laws.
Okay, let him respond to you now, Arshpreet.
Towards the government, disaffection, last point. The sedition law says if you show any disaffection towards the government, you'll be prosecuted. Why should it not be the state? Government is not India. Mr. Obama has lectured the government, not the citizens of India.
Yeah, but I'm not sure why you're talking about sedition, or you're talking about UAPA, or you're talking about cases that go through courts. Once again, Arshpreet, please don't speak over me. I'll give you opportunity. I'm not sure why that is why that is a case against the Modi government. These were laws that existed under you. You never repealed them.
But they were never misused.
But that's subjective. I'm sorry. There could be hundreds of people who could come out and say that these laws were misused even under you. Any law under any government is subject to misuse.
Now, please do not speak over me also.
No, once again, you've had your time. Sushant will respond to you. Two of our other guests have not spoken. CAA, NRC, how many Muslims are there in the cabinet?
No, I don't know whether there's any Muslim in the cabinet. Is that the basis on of which you judge whether a community is being discriminated against or not? I don't think so. Maybe that is the token representative. Arshpreet, you've had your say. Now let me have my say. Maybe that is the Congress party way of doing things, that you throw a few crumbs at some people and say that, well, we have accommodated them. Right? Let us ask. Arshpreet has not answered my question on the riot after riot after riot under the Congress watch. Was that being done by the Congress party? Because it was being done under the Congress party watch, number one. Number two, when he talks about the special laws, there are special laws, for example, in the US. Please, Arshpreet, give me the similar numbers of how many blacks are in prison compared to how many whites are in prison. Please tell me in the UK, how many Muslims as a proportion of their population are in prison compared to how many Hindus or how many white people are in prison as a proportion of population. Please give me those figures, because you seem to think that if you shit on India, that's the right way to, burnish your politics.
Okay.
But I don't think that is the case.
Okay.
Now, the point is, either you give me that data and then you make a comparison with what is happening in India, or basically what you are doing is all kind of virtue signaling without any basis to what you are saying.
All right.
Because the laws, who brought in TADA and who misused TADA? Please tell us. Who brought in UAPA? How many people were arrested under UAPA when your government was in power? Please tell us in those 6 years.
Yeah. Okay. No. Once again, Arshpreet, two of our guests haven't spoken. Let me give them an opportunity to come in with their opening remarks. R. Rajagopalan, is the criticism of the current government fair? Let's say Arshpreet has a point. You look at the representation that the BJP gives when it comes to tickets to Muslims, and you look at the representation that the BJP government gives to minority faces. then would the natural question not arise that, you don't include them in representation in the government?
Shivani, I must congratulate your editorial team for bringing out the best package. That itself replies to the Congress spokesperson. Second, during the Ukraine war, during Corona, Ukraine war, I know there are 1,800 Muslim students have been brought from Ukraine's war zone very safely. During Corona, all the Indian citizens were inoculated. 260 crores. There was no discrimination. Hope Mr. Obama knows about it. Apart from that, Mr. Serene has mentioned about riots, 1984 and others. But I would like to remind you and Mr. Serene, 2009 Sri Lanka Jaffna genocide done by UPA government. DMK withdrew support because of the genocide. And apart from that, to put my point very simply, probably Obama might have met Rahul Gandhi before the interview of CNN IBN.
CNN, not CNN IBN, but yes, our sister concern. But Mr. Rajagopalan, the issue is for the government, and I asked this of a government minister on Friday. This question keeps chasing them. Yes, you could argue that even as the Prime Minister took oath in 2014, we were being told that it's doomsday, especially for minorities, and India will no longer remain a democracy and certainly not a secular democracy. It's been 9 years since then. Has this government, when it says we've not discriminated, been able to deflate this narrative? Now, that's also something the government only can do, right?
The government has been very fair. My understanding is that, even Mr. Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, who was Minister for Minority Affairs, he was mainly instrument in sending 4,000 Muslim women to Hajj. Why Sushant Serene did not refer that? Why Congress spokesman did not refer that? Did Mr. Obama know about these facts? Has he visited one place? He is getting briefed only by these, toolkits and by Rahul Gandhi's occasional press statements. That probably Rahul Gandhi during his USA visit must have met Obama secretly before the interview was happening.
All right. I'm running that analysis one more time. Ashok Sajjanhar, I'm coming to you. I was particularly intrigued by the fact that even when the reporters asked this question and when Mr. Obama talked about it, he didn't talk about, instances of discrimination or violence. He talked about rights. Now, there is not a single right that is denied to any minority in India. Linguistic, tribal, you have backward classes, you have religion. We have lots of minorities in India. Not a single right is denied to any one of them. In fact, under the Indian Constitution and laws, there are special privileges given to minorities, including religious minorities. So I don't understand why this question about rights is fair. Is it fair?
No, I don't think it's fair at all. I think when there are people who have nothing else to criticize the government, and I think this flows out really, Shivani, from within us, from within the country, because this is the narrative that is sought to be painted, that is a narrative that is sought to be transmitted to their interlocutors outside the country, and it is these people only that they are able to hear. You have seen these reports also from Pew. They have conducted this poll, and they have said that 98% of the Muslim population in India feels that they have no problem in
following their
pursuing their religion,
yes.
And they don't feel any discrimination whatsoever. Meaning the percentage of people who feel discriminated in developed countries, in the United States, are hugely greater, in the range of about 42-44% by the same Pew reporting. So, these are non-existent issues, and even within the country, when we find that our political parties have no real issues on which they can criticize the government, this is the narrative that is sought to be
built. As a diplomat, can I ask you,
yes.
were you surprised
yes.
by the kind of language or even the direction in which Mr. Obama spoke? Because many are pointing out that him, as a former US president, he may not be the current president, but he still has a lot of stature. As a former US president, to suggest that India's internal conflicts, quote unquote, could break it is not the language that should come from a foreign leader.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. I think this is totally uncalled for. And this is sensationalizing it. This is in my view, and particularly because he still goes out on these lecture tours, multi-million-dollar lecture tours, and his voice is listened to with great respect, and people trust him and believe him. For him to come out with this sort of statement without any basis, without any factual evidence, just on the basis of hearsay, people who are the loudest, those voices you will hear and you will start repeating them. I think it doesn't befit a person of his stature, the position that he has occupied, and the reverence that he has, that he enjoys.
I was also intrigued, as I mentioned in my opening, Sushant, I have 30 seconds. There was a vast difference in what Mr. Obama was saying and what the current president is saying. How do you look at that? Was it good, bad cop, or are there real differences in what Mr. Obama is looking at India as and what Mr. Biden is trying to achieve?
No, I think there were two sides to it. One was that, since Mr. Biden is in a seat of authority, seat of power, he has to do business with India. He cannot be cavalier in his attitude towards India. He cannot be hectoring towards India. So one part of it was that. The second part of it was that he was on the mark, because again, he said that, we all have our problems. India has problems. The Americans have problems. If Americans have problems, they will discuss certain things with India. We will clarify to them in our own way. But if anybody in the US or anywhere else in the world expects that we'll become their clones, that we will become, the definition of liberal democracy as per American standards will also apply in India, they're living in cloud cuckoo land. For example, when the Americans are pretty blasé about stuff like critical race theory, or for that matter, genital mutilation of small children of 3 years, 4 years old, I don't think I as a parent will ever accept something like that. To hell with democracy if that is your definition of liberal democracy.
No, not democracy. That's the definition of inclusion and pluralism.
In India.
And I think we know that in some quarters, definition of inclusion and pluralism is getting stretched to a certain level where people legitimately have the right to raise concerns. But I've run out of time. I do thank all of our guests for joining us. Let's also now bring you this special conversation that I had with American sociologist Professor Salvatore Babones. Now, he was the first one who actually brought into context the Pew survey that talked about self-reported discrimination in India, particularly by minorities. Listen into this conversation that is still relevant today. In your article, you contend that Christian missionary and Islamist pressures are working behind the scenes in some of these reports we see over India, some of these rankings that routinely seem to be very terrible on India and term India as anti-Muslim or, anti-religious freedom or religious expression. Explain that. Why do you believe that there is a nexus behind these rankings?
Well, so first let me contextualize it. Genocide Watch, international NGO, rates India one of the 10 most likely countries to experience a genocide in the 2020s. Wow. They claim that there is a 8% chance that there will be a genocide in India in 2023. Now look around you in India. Is there likely to be a genocide? I don't think so.
I really don't think so.
But this narrative has been built and built and built. And a lot of it has to do with these international religious freedom reports produced by the U.S. State Department and particularly by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, which puts together these reports on international religious freedom. Now, the reports compiled by the State Department on India focused almost entirely on complaints made by Christian missionaries. Because if you think about it, if a Muslim in India feels she's facing discrimination, is she likely to go to the U.S. State Department to complain? It's likely not. Okay. So of the hundreds of complaints made to the U.S. State Department about repression of religious freedom in India, fewer than 10, single-digit numbers, have to do with Muslims. 800 or more have to do with Christians.
Yeah. Okay. And Christian missionaries.
It's all missionary related. Yeah. However, when the Pew Research Center did its international religious freedom rankings based on these reports, first, it rated India the worst country in the world. I'm emphasizing that. Worst in the world for social hostility to religion, meaning that people face more communal violence, more religious hostility in India than in Myanmar, which just had a genocide. I mean, the Rohingya were driven out of Myanmar. They're claiming the situation in India is worse than in Myanmar. That's all based on these U.S. State Department reports where all of the complaints are made by missionaries. Yet in their text narrative of their report, they only mention complaints
against Muslims.
But we don't have to rely on these primarily qualitative rankings based on reports of journalists and NGOs because we have hard survey data about religious freedom in India. Ironically, it comes from the same Pew Research Center, but from a different group at the Pew Research Center. And this hard survey data shows us that violence or discrimination against Muslims and Christians in India reported by actual Muslims and Christians in India is very rare. The Pew Research Center did an extraordinarily high-quality survey in 2019-2020 of 29,999 households in India. I think they wish they'd gotten just one more. 29,999. Top quality survey, more than an 85% response rate, which in survey research is unheard of. You have to really try hard to get an 85% response rate. This wasn't a telephone or a internet survey. This was knocking on doors, personally talking to people in 17 different languages, all across India. They found that 89% of Christians and 89% of Muslims say they are, quote unquote, very free to practice their religion in India. Only 2% of each group say they are unfree. Okay, so only a tiny minority of Christians and Muslims have any complaint about their ability to freely practice religion in India. I mean, I'll give you another statistic. 24% of Indian Muslims say they face some form of discrimination on account of their religion. Now, that sounds bad. Until you realize, first, 72% of Indian Muslims say they've never faced discrimination on account of their religion. What's more, we can take that 24% of Indian Muslims say they've at some point in their lives faced religious discrimination and compare it to the same question asked in the United States. So the Pew Research Center, in a separate survey, asked exactly the same question with exactly the same wording in the United States, asking about racial discrimination. 80% of African Americans say they face discrimination. 46% of Hispanic Americans. 42% of Asian Americans, and only 24% of Indian Muslims. In other words, self-reported discrimination in India is, for Muslims and for Christians is lower than for Asian Americans. So if you want to say that Muslims and Christians are facing discrimination in India, you have to wrestle with the fact that whatever level of discrimination there is, and there certainly is some. I mean, somebody in India is 1.4 billion people, somebody has faced discrimination. But that level of discrimination reported by the very people who are dealing with it is lower than what Indian and Chinese Americans report in the United States.
And yet it is projected like, you know, recently there have been hashtags about a genocide in India, for example, that India is so anti-Muslim that there's so much widespread violence against Muslims that they can't literally live in India without fear.
Everyone thinks that India's Muslims are on the verge of a genocide except India's Muslims.
Yeah, exactly.
India's Muslims, when asked what are the top problems you face today, number one is unemployment.
Exactly.
Number two is crime. Number three is corruption. Intercommunal violence is number four.